Namaste and welcome to the Global Order. I'm your host, Swareena Singh. Today we have with us Dr. Hindol Sengupta, a multiple award-winning historian and author of 13 acclaimed books. He is the co-founder director at the Global Order. Currently, he is also a professor and the executive dean at the Hindol School of International Affairs. Previously, he has been the vice president of strategy and research at Invest India under the Ministry of Commerce. Dr. Sengupta's multidisciplinary work is fundamentally concerned with understanding India's rise in the world, the political, social, and cultural underpinnings of the act of rising. He connects international relations, history, economics, trade, culture, and religion. In light of this, Dr. Sengupta, I welcome you for a conversation on India's ambitious and much debated Great Nicobar Project. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be in conversation with you, Swareena. I do believe, yes, indeed, the Great Nicobar Project is one of the seminal projects that India would build, not just because it is one more large infrastructure project, but indeed, if we look at it cartographically, it, in a sense, gives us what we call a forward defense. It essentially projects Indian power from its gaggle of islands that are part of Indian territory right up to the mouth of the Malacca Strait. Now, this is important for various reasons, as we will discuss in this conversation, but undoubtedly, the Great Nicobar Project is indeed one of the most important projects that India is looking to build.
Thank you so much, sir. I would, however, like for you to please set the tone of the conversation by helping our viewers understand what problem is the Great Nicobar Project actually trying to solve for India?
One of the biggest security issues, India is a very strange country. We have seen loss of territory in the living memory of the Republic, so to speak, as in the recent past. I'm, of course, talking about conflicts with Pakistan, of course, with China, the 62 war. In many of these issues, we have seen conflict at our doorstep. We have seen war at our doorstep. Of course, who can forget only a few months ago, the conflict that we saw with Pakistan. And we have seen deep-seated, protracted battles on territory and even loss of territory. In spite of all this, there seems to be in the public square of India, in the public imagination of India, this persistent belief that we are entirely secure. And I often argue that, in fact, we are not. And at every single step, we are being told that we are not. A few years ago, we began discussing this entire string of pearls theory of China encircling India with outposts all around it, many of naval outposts. Now we're talking about crisis on our eastern border. Many of the viewers would already know about this, what's happening in Myanmar, what's happening in Bangladesh, and so on and so forth. The constant conversations, of course, about chicken's neck. Then, of course, we have China on the northern border, Pakistan on one side, constant, altercations on those areas too. Therefore, I think we are now in a situation where certainly we must think more carefully and more adequately about Indian security. And one of the ways after what happened in the Strait of Hormuz is something that the Chinese actually have always, in a sense, been scared of. China has always spoken about the Malacca dilemma. The manifestations of the Malacca dilemma are something that we actually saw when Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz. What does it really mean? It means that global trade uses maritime routes across the world. And in certain areas of those maritime routes, there are what are known as choke points. Now, those choke points basically mean small areas through which ships must navigate. And those areas are such, those geographies, the terrain is such that it can easily be stopped or curtailed, which is exactly what happened in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Chinese believe, because most of their oil and other fossil fuel and energy sources, gas and oil, go through the Malacca Strait, this is another major choke point that can be used against them at any point. And they have done all kinds of things to try and mitigate this. One of them, of course, is the Belt and Road Project. Of course, all of us know about that project. One of the key areas of that project stretches all the way from Xinjiang, going straight down to Gwadar, through Balochistan. That, of course, is in peril at the moment. But therefore, Chinese military might in the naval sense has been increasing consistently. In fact, at this very moment, China is expanding its navy at a rate faster than any other navy has expanded ever in history. Considering all of those things, considering we also know and suspect that Chinese intervention has come into what we really believe is our sort of area of influence, the Bay of Bengal, considering what the Chinese are trying to do with Bangladesh, and that we have a difficult relationship even with this particular administration in Bangladesh, we must work very hard to ensure that our security, especially in the Bay of Bengal area, is properly protected. And one way we can really push our security needs and in fact our power onto Chinese doorsteps is by projecting power right up to the mouth of the Malacca Strait. This is exactly what the Great Nicobar Project does. By the way, allow me to say that the Great Nicobar Project has been thought of for years by the US government, but in classic Indian style, we have never done anything about it. And I have written now extensively about this to say that this project is critical for us. The transshipment harbor, the other infrastructural developments that are going to happen there. Many of them are what is known as dual use, which means that in a moment of crisis, a civilian infrastructure can be used by the military too. So this is critical for us. I understand that there are environmental and other concerns, but we must try to balance these because it's very critical that we build this infrastructure now and do not delay it any further. It is critical for our trade, for our transshipment, needs in the future, and indeed, definitely for our security needs.
If you do word it like that, from the critical perspective, I think it becomes hard to think of reasons to counter it. But at the same time, like you said, that there are concerns in with regards to the environment. And then you speak about balancing that. In that regard, then at what point should environmental concerns override strategic and economic considerations in projects such as the Great Nicobar? Or should they override at all, or vice versa? So that's one thing that I'd like to know.
All policy making, allow me to say that all policy making is an act of balancing. Look, there is no such thing as 100% absolutist policy making. And remember, all infrastructure development leads to some environmental loss. There is no infrastructure developed anywhere in the world that has led to no loss in terms of environment. Right? You just have to balance and see how you can mitigate, number one, how you can mitigate that loss. And number two, how you can, in a sense, guardrail it so that, only so much is impacted and not more. In one of the recent essays that I wrote, I gave the example of Singapore. Singapore is one of the per capita income-wise on wealthiest parts of the world. Please remember, until recently, Singapore, and recently in historical terms, of course, until recently in historical terms, Singapore was basically, as was often written about it in those years, a mosquito-ridden backwaters. It was a tiny place. It was very low development. It was plagued with issues. And yet Singapore has emerged as one of the world's wealthiest places with one of the highest per capita incomes. All of this has happened because they have built infrastructure for trade in a manner very few have been able to do around the world. In fact, places like Dubai have tried to replicate what Singapore did. Right? And Lee Kuan Yew's incredible vision made it happen. So as I noted in an essay that I recently wrote about this, despite Singapore being so critical for transshipment, as we see transshipment rates rise around the world, there will be a need for another major transshipment hub there, and India can fulfill that. It is critical for our economic needs. However, let's come to the environment part of it. Yes, there are pristine virgin forest areas in those regions. Yes, there are protected tribes in those regions. However, if you look at the plan carefully, a lot of the core area is not even being touched in the plan. I am not suggesting at all that there will not be some impact. There will be some impact. And if you read the environmental status report of this project, a lot of work happened on it before it got environmental clearance. You will see that it has been put in detail how the number of trees that will be, or the number of trees that will be cut, the impact that will happen on the environment, how it will be mitigated, where else replantation will happen, how that will be expanded, and so on and so forth. Also, as far as the tribes are concerned, in most of the, if you look at plan carefully, most of the tribal areas are really not being touched at all. In fact, what is happening is in net terms, actually the protected area is going up by a little bit, because they're going to mitigate whatever's being done in one part by giving more protected area on another part. So all of this is, I think the plan is quite solid. There is a lot of work that has happened in it. However, I am not going to deny that there will be some environmental impact, because of course, as I said, those are really virgin waters and virgin forest. Anything that you do there will be an impact, right? So however, on balance, I think we should try our level best to apply all the things that have been said in the environmental clearance to mitigate this damage. We should, as far as possible, really not touch the core areas so that the tribal areas are not touched. And we should continuously process this so that more and more environmental mitigation can and should happen. Now, how will that happen? You might ask, what is the other processes through which we can do this? Well, remember, one of the questions people ask is, this is the high seismic zone area, right? So should we build something like this in a high seismic zone area? Tomorrow an earthquake comes, a tsunami comes, 2000 and in the early 2000s, already we had a major tsunami. If that comes, there will be a huge disaster. But today, from the early 2000s to 2026, technology on how to build in this area has advanced considerably. I'll give you the example of Japan. Please remember, Japan is also at a high seismic zone, right? And therefore, everything that Japan builds has this problem. And yet the Japanese have built some of the most forward-looking infrastructure in the world. They've been able to do it with the use of effective technology. And I think today there is no dearth of technological access as far as India is concerned. We need to apply much more of that to ensure that what we are building fulfills the purpose with which we are building it and fulfills this goal with which we're building it. But using all this technology, using these environmental plans consistently and in a proactive level mitigates the issues of environment, which, by the way, I absolutely do not think should be, ignored or, put aside, or so on and so forth. The world is, after all, going through a sustainability challenge, and environment is very, very critical. But please remember, as I often remind many of my audiences, if you don't have a country, if your sovereign rights do not exist, then there is no environment to protect. You must have a country to protect its environment. So, if there are deep sovereign needs, they have to be met, in my opinion, at least.
That is a detailed answer, sir, but a few questions are coming to mind. One of the things that you mentioned
Please.
were the indigenous people in the area, the Shompen tribe and the Nicobarese people. But
Yes.
I remember reading that one of the environmental impact assessment reports by the government itself says that if adequate measures are not taken, then the tribe itself is under the threat of being wiped out completely. And this is in light of the fact that they are building a township and the government has predicted that the population may rise from 8,000 to 6.5 lakhs in the coming years. That is one thing. And the second thing, in fact, you have written about this in the past as well, that when people give the argument of the seismic zone, Japan is one country which is built on that sort of a zone and has the technology. They are surviving, they're doing pretty, in fact, they're thriving. But in that sense, I'll club one more question with this, that even if we were to accept the strategic and economic rationale of the project, do you think that the Indian state has the administrative capacity to implement it in a way and draw equivalences with a country like Japan? In that regards, what do you see as the biggest challenge to its successful execution?
I think very good questions, all of them. I'll take the third one first, if you allow me. Administrative capability in India is always suspect, right? I will give you an example. When we were talking about Aadhaar and UPI in our country, in Parliament, questions were raised. Oh, what do you mean there will be a mobile payment thing? You think a villager sitting in some village or a farm will be able to use their phone to make a payment? And it is true, all those years ago, when somebody said this in Parliament, perhaps it may have sounded like an entirely valid argument that we are going to spend these huge amount of money to build this entire infrastructure. For who? Is it only for the rich? Today, if you look at how fintech works in India, The maximum beneficiaries of fintech are in fact individual Indians in every part of the country. It has made their lives. Today, I am astonished sometimes. I was giving a lecture somewhere and I was showing, today you go to Kashmir and you want to go for a shikara ride. There is an ability to pay with a QR code that's pasted on the boat to pay for that shikara ride. You go to vegetable sellers and flower sellers outside temples in the north and south. You want to pay for it, they will show you a little card with a QR code with which you can pay for it. It has had a huge impact. I'll give you one more example. When the metro rail services were being built in the country, once again, there was this entire debate, first in Calcutta and then in Delhi. Oh, this is only going to be for the rich. And, do we have capacity to even manage this, something like this? We are not like London and New York. We will never be able to manage this. It will just be a waste of money and so on and so forth. In fact, what has turned out is, interestingly, that the metro system, especially in Delhi, is the most clean and well maintained part of our urban transport infrastructure. The same people who might dirty or litter outside the metro do not do it inside the metro because it is well maintained. There is this whole syndrome called the broken window syndrome. If there is a broken window, if there's dirt, people will throw more dirt there. If it's clean, you put a light there, you fix the windows, people won't dirty it because there is some hesitance in all of us to immediately break and dirty something that is neat. I am saying that we have no choice but to make advancements as far as institutional capacity is concerned to build infrastructure. We cannot be in a mindset anymore to say, well, ye humse, as they say in Hindi, ye humse nahi ho paega. We are not going to be able to do it. This mindset doesn't work anymore. We have to take leaps of faith, which is why, for instance, we're building bullet trains. Again, some people might say, oh, why do we need bullet trains? Well, who will it help? Only the rich. Actually, you will see once it's built, especially on, highly economically active sectors like Ahmedabad to Mumbai, for instance, there will be tremendous traffic and transformation in these sectors, right? It's the same in this particular case also. The benefits are huge. Yes, you could ask the question, and I think validly, oh, well, do we have the capacity to build something like this? I think obviously one can't give 100% answer at this juncture, but we must believe that we will be able to do it, because not being able to do it is not really an option. We are 1.4, maybe 1.5 billion people today. We have our security needs, we have our economic needs. We have to take moonshots, what are known as moonshots, right? Unless we take moonshots, I think India is at a place at the moment, Swareena, where each of us must take moonshots. If we don't take moonshots, we will be stuck in a lower middle income trap, and that will be devastating for a country as much as. Let me take the other two questions. Yes, indeed, the Shompen tribe is very, very critical. There are, by last records, only about 237 or 240 members of the Shompen tribe that live there. It's actually that small. And I'm making the argument that if the community is that small, surely we have the resources to ensure that they are adequately taken care of, because it's not a large community. We are not talking about tens and thousands of people. We are literally talking about a couple of hundred people. And why don't we work, therefore, to ensure that their core areas are not disturbed? More effort is made to sort of mitigate any impact that will happen in their lives. However, having said all of this, when you build, you mentioned the span of the housing quarters of the township that will be built there. Will there be no impact? No, I would be lying if I said there would be no impact. There will always be some impact. As I said, we have to consistently work to mitigate that impact. Will there be some impact? Certainly. And let's take the first question you asked now. Considering the kind of environmental crisis that we have around the world, and certainly in India, do the environmental factors sometimes override any other need? I do think we cannot think of any project today without mitigating the environment factor. Gone are the days when, public policy can just shove aside environmental factors and go ahead. This entire builder-led and, real estate-led sort of development is a bad idea. We know it's a bad idea. We can see the state our cities are in today, right? Having said that, I think there should be there is and there should be even more focus on this issue, including on Great Nicobar Project. We should ensure that, monitoring by various organizations, including civil society, should ensure that whatever mitigating plans that have been mentioned in the environmental report actually is built on the ground. Because sometimes what happens is you have this wonderful plan on paper, on ground, it's not getting delivered. So we have to ensure that this happens in a sort of seamless way. And having said all of that, mitigating all of that, I still feel, and these are always personal opinions, I still feel we need to build this project, because it's really critical for us. And some of our closest and most, adverse adversities, if I may say so, are actually quite worried about this. And they're worried because this will really strengthen some of our critical defenses, which they would not like.
Thank you for that detailed answer and also a visible shift in perspective. I hope there are more such passionate people out there who are actually implementing the project. And as you said that we need to have a country for an environment to protect, I think the opposite is also true, that there needs to be an environment stable enough for our country to thrive. So then I believe
That's
that
very well
balance
said.
needs to be there.
I take that.
On
I take that point.
Thank you. I would, though, like to conclude with a slight shift towards political philosophy, maybe,
Sure.
given that it's your area of expertise as well, that while the opposition to the project can be seen as evidence of healthy democratic scrutiny, it can also be interpreted as a broader reluctance to undertake ambitious national projects. In this light, which interpretation do you find more convincing and why?
I mean, look, I want to quote K. Subramaniam, the father of the incumbent foreign minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Now, Mr. Subramaniam was what in today's parlance would be called an OG. He was one of the pioneering security thinkers of our country, one of the pioneering international relations and security minds of our country. And he actually had seminal contributions to make in thinking about these issues in our country. Mr. Subramaniam used to make this point. He was once asked in an interview, why is it that the Indian elite is so lackadaisical and does not think through the security needs of its own nation? And he answered that the Indian elite traditionally has been extremely selfish, self-centered, and very narrow-band thinking. They only want their immediate transactional, benefit. They never think long-term for the country. I'll give you an example of this. It's the same thing that we've always discussed. People like clean homes, the Indian elite and others actually like clean homes of their own, but they're happy to dirty the environment right outside their doorstep because they are thinking transactionally all the time. And I think in many such projects, and we can speak about this all day, all night, because there are so many such projects we could perhaps discuss, which could have been done a long time ago and it couldn't be done. It just it just never did worked out because the elites who control the system just did not see what would be the long-term benefit. By the way, one of those is the Indian nuclear program, and perhaps at some point we'll have an opportunity to discuss that in more detail. But all of these, if you study them a little deeply, you would ask yourself the question, this is almost obvious as I research it. Why wasn't it done years ago? And it wasn't done years ago because of this, should I say, cultural failing among the Indian elite. The Indian elite refuses to see the long-term benefit of the country. They are far more concerned about the short-term benefits of their own self. I think it's changing. I definitely think things are changing in India, but this is a real problem. And, because you asked a political philosophy question, this is the problem. Now, this can be unpacked in academic ways in many ways. And what are the reasons? Could there be, in the early years of the Republic, remnants of a colonial mindset where the controlling and the ruling elite thought themselves to be separate from the people that they govern? There could be all kinds of reasons. I mean, we can unpack this till the cows come home, so to speak. But certainly this is a problem. And the answer to your question is this problem. If and in fact, I would include you and I as English-speaking, city-dwelling Indians as we're not part of the Indian elite per se, maybe, but we're certainly part of the Indian public square or the civil society, right? And as a civil society, if we do not have the ability to think long-term about the country's benefits, then there is a problem. And this problem we sadly have faced again and again.
Thank you for that answer. I was reflecting while listening to you. Maybe one of the ways then is to really build on the narratives that matter. And Global Order seems to provide a space to do just that, to hold these conversations and provide insights into significant topics. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you also for joining today for this conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and thanks for the wonderful and incisive questions.